and welcome to this Intelligent Briefing. My name is Jess Phillips, Director of Strategic Content at Lynchburg Media. In this edition of our Deep Dive series, I'm speaking with Sherrod DeGrippo, Senior Director, Emerging Threats at Proofpoint. We're looking today at malware trends, exploring those which organisations need to be aware of, and finding out how they can prepare for and respond to these types of attacks. Thank you for joining me this afternoon, Sherrod.
Thanks for having me, Jess. It's great to be here.
My first question to you, quite broad. Can you tell us how the threat landscape has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure. That's a question that we've been thinking about for several months. And obviously, as we saw the situation develop over the past several months, beginning at the early part of 2020, as things started to move west, we definitely were questioning how this current event would impact the threat landscape. And we did see the first use of COVID-19 in social engineering attacks in late January. And those were against targets in the West. So it was absolutely something that was on the mind of the threat actors and started quite early as that news came in. Now, as things have changed over the summer, it has become, over the spring and summer, it has become more specific and tailored. So instead of just talking about the virus, we see social engineering talking about the vaccine, or saying, click here to see a list of people who have been infected in your area. We see it used as a way to push for urgency. So because of COVID-19, I'm in lockdown and I can't leave my home, so I need you to take care of this for me. The social engineering has become more detailed and specific as we learn more about the virus, as people shift to working from home, which really does go hand in hand with the pandemic developing.
Thank you. And where are these threats coming from then? Are we talking about cyber criminals, nation states, and what is the motivation behind them?
So we've actually seen just about every actor on the landscape leverage it in some way, everything from our typical commodity crimeware, large-scale actors. We've seen state-sponsored actors leverage it. And we've also seen those smaller actors like email fraud and BEC actors, typically based out of West Africa. Those actors have used it as well. So it's pretty much all opportunity. Everyone's been using it. Well, when it comes to motivation for attacks like these, typically they're financially motivated. Of course, the state-sponsored actors are motivated by espionage and nation-state type interests. But for the most part, the motivations that these actors have hasn't really changed. The social engineering lures that they're leveraging is what has become the new thing.
Sure. And what about verticals or regions? Are there any particular verticals or regions that are being particularly affected by this?
In terms of COVID-19, it did start really focusing on targets in the West, but at this point, anyone, anywhere really is subject to potentially getting a COVID-19 social engineering lure. It has become really popular and widespread to the point where we don't really consider it an unusual type of lure. We see those day in and day out now in all kinds of different ways. So it's really become the standard.
Okay, and can you talk to us about malware threats? Are there any particular malware trends or things that organizations should be aware of when it comes to malware right now?
Sure. Malware is something that's always evolving. That's one of the things that we can count on, is that it's never the same day to day, week to week. So in terms of trends, especially in 2020, over the past year or year and a half, we've really seen the emergence of two similar things that work together. The first is the age of the modular downloader. So these downloader malware samples essentially get on a machine, and then they download second, third, and later stage payloads, meaning that the threat actor can make a decision about what is actually put on that machine in the end. Now, something you've all been hearing a lot about is, of course, ransomware. So what we've noticed is that these operator-controlled downloaders typically are the delivery vehicle for ransomware when the threat actor makes the decision that ransomware is the right choice.
Which types of malware are the most detrimental or have the most devastating consequences for enterprises?
In terms of the malware that's the most damaging, it really depends on what your business focus is. It really depends on what your operations look like day to day. A banking Trojan, which steals money out of a bank account, may be really, really devastating for some businesses if they operate on a really tight cash flow. Whereas ransomware on a few machines, they might be able to turn those around quickly and not have that much of a problem. What we have seen absolutely is that ransomware in a large scale deployment has been absolutely devastating for organizations. What the landscape looks like now is, in the past, you got ransomware on one machine and it was sort of an inconvenience, but your IT team could take care of it. They'd give you a new laptop and you'd move on. But the new ransomware landscape is about a much more deliberate and strategic approach, where the threat actors are looking to ransom an entire company, their entire business operations, and shut that whole organization down at once in order to get a much, much larger ransom payment. Used to see $100, $800 for ransoms. Now we're seeing ransoms in the millions because what they're able to ransom is no longer just files, but an entire company's ability to operate.
So hugely detrimental effects. How successful are these threat actors being in obtaining these ransoms?
So that's a good question. And typically in my line of work, we look to stop these things before they ever get to those end users. But from what I have seen in the media, it does appear that a lot of the very sophisticated ransomware actors are able to extract a decent amount of the ransoms that they deploy. Now, there is some question around what is the culpability of an organization that pays a ransom, because there are various international laws, there are indictments to consider. So when an organization is dealing with that, they want to make sure that the first thing they've done today is they have a plan for how they'll deal not with incidents and not with ransomware, but with incidents and ransomware in a pandemic. So we don't just want our incident response plan. We want an incident response plan for things, plus ransomware, plus a pandemic. And I don't think a lot of organizations are prepared that way. So they need to work on that today.
And what would your advice be to organizations that are preparing their incident response?
I think best practice advice for incident response is really to understand your people and your processes, because the threat actors have taken that upon themselves as well. They will know your processes internally, your business processes, just as well as you do. So it's important to deeply understand those. And I think in addition to that, what's really important for organizations to think about is, hey, we're not operating in our traditional world anymore. The IT help desk is not down on the third floor the way they used to be. Our users are now spread out at their homes and they're competing for internet with their kids, their spouse. It's a much different reality to the way that we have to respond to incidents today than we did a year ago. And updating those plans now, if an organization hasn't already, is the most important thing.
And how can organizations then create a robust cyber defense strategy for preventing or protecting against these types of malware attacks?
So I think because I've been in the industry for so long, I really still believe in the best practices that you learn from all of those foundational concepts in information security, like defense in depth, having strong patch management, and really building an information security program. And it's not something that you can write up a plan and put a book in a drawer and then never think about it again. It really should be a living document that is conducive to a security program that you're constantly revisiting, updating, and continuing to strengthen all of the time.
For CISOs, CIOs, security professionals that are kind of planning for the year ahead for 2021, what 2 or 3 kind of key priorities would you say they should be tackling as we go into the new year to get on top of malware specifically? And would your advice differ depending on which region the advice was given for?
Sure, that's a great question. So I think looking ahead into 2021, those executives in those positions, I think that the two things that are really important is understanding what's coming in and out of your environment. In email, in the network, we talk about information security, and really what that is protecting information. And when information is in transit, that's when the security problems begin. So understanding what's coming in and what's coming out. Email continues to be the #1 threat vector. So understanding what is coming in. And then for my second point, understanding what is coming in to whom. Who are these people that are receiving these threats? Why are they attracted to the threat actors? I'm really focused, especially as we go into the next year, on thinking about not threat modeling, but threat inventory. What threats are actually coming in? It really shouldn't be a theoretical practice anymore. We really should be able to understand from a people-centric lens, each person in our organization, and what threats they're actually facing each day, which then, coming back to our CIO and CISO, how are they making their decisions about who to protect, where, and with what? And that's what we really want to understand. Who's getting the black SUV and the sunglasses and the bodyguards? From a security perspective, from a data perspective, where are we putting those efforts and resources, understanding why each individual needs the security that they need? So in terms of threat to region, I think that there absolutely are vertical targeted threats. There are absolutely regionally targeted threats. And we see those tailored to the financial institutions that are used in a specific region or specific government alerts. And so I think it's really important to make sure that the people that are potential targets in your organization understand the realities of what to click on and what not to click on. And we've also seen the threat landscape really align and focus itself around business hours, business days, business processes. So understanding that the more that you're sitting at that desk, the more you actually are at risk. It really does go down on weekends and holidays. So having a good understanding that the threat landscape is more active on the days that people are more active at work, and being conscious of that to avoid potential social engineering threats.
Do you think that organisations should be more open or more transparent, perhaps, with these kinds of threats? Like, should the people that are working, doing their jobs day to day, should they be aware of the scale of the threats that are out there? Or is it better to have this kind of general security culture and then kind of leave the terrifying aspects to the people that are the defenders?
I think, my philosophy there is always the more you know, the better it is, right? So having a user base and colleagues that understand what these threats are can really resonate. I've found as well that really walking through individuals and showing them one-to-one, this is the threat that was targeting you. Now, it was stopped, but if it wasn't, this is what would have happened. This is what it looked like. And they specifically sent this to you. Or pulling those analytics and being able to show someone, you get more credential phishing than anyone else in our company. Or we noticed that the interns get a lot of banking Trojans. Understanding what the threats are coming into your workforce and then helping them understand that, I think it's really, really helpful. And it doesn't have to be fear-based. It can absolutely be informative. And then coupled with, look, we know about this and we're telling you about it. And we are doing our best to protect from a technological perspective. We're just asking you to help us protect from a human perspective. And combining those things together is really the only way to fully protect any organization, is to have a strong technical perspective, a strong digital strategy, and then also have humans who know what to do.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen any or heard of any interesting initiatives for the training aspect and for that awareness side of it?
Well, in our work, we're really focused on enabling our customers to be able to do that sort of program, to really walk through name by name and show an individual the kinds of threats that they're receiving. We're also really focused on making sure that all of the training programs, so security and awareness training programs, match with the reality of what those threats are coming into that organization and coming into those individuals. So for example, if you're in a healthcare organization, being trained on threats to manufacturing or oil and gas, it doesn't make sense. So sending the real types of threats in those simulations that organization or that job title really gets is very, very helpful. And I think that that is the way to make it much more personal to people.